Alright, a couple people have been whispering me from PoE Ninja and Reddit and YouTube asking about this character. Basically, this is my Shattershard witch. A couple of people have made videos about this mechanic by now. I just thought I would throw my take on it into the hat. This is my level 97 character. It's currently an occultist. It has been an elementalist in the past, and it might be one again. But basically, yeah, this is sort of what the build looks like. You can see I'm shield charging around. It's sort of an auto bomber playstyle, and the big white ring that's going off, that is the triggered skill. In the time stamps below, I'll leave a video of some map clears, and I'll leave a description of the mechanics, as well as some POB stuff at the end for how I've actually built the character and what my plans are for the future. So one map clear is going to be sort of an ethical vegan clear with no shrines, and then the other one is how I've actually been playing the game, which is a bunch of shrine scarabs and Atlas tree, just because the build becomes really fun when you start clicking Excel shrines and stuff. But yeah, you don't need them for the build to function. That's the point of the ethical clear, so you can choose which one you want to watch, or watch both of them and make up your own mind. Nobody wants to look at slideshows all day, but I'll try to speedrun this explanation. This is Shattershard. This is what the build is based around. This has been the game for a while, but basically what you're interested in is the trigger shield shatter when you block. What is shield shatter? It's a physical spell damage nova. So when you block, it does a big ring around you. This does base physical damage based on the quality of the shield. So at a 20 quality shield as baseline, you're doing about 7 to 10,000 damage total. The shield does, or the skill rather, has a second line that says, for a short duration after you block, you can't block anymore. This basically means that the entire time you're playing the build, you cannot block. That goes for attacks and spells. Slightly unfortunate, but it is what it is. So when you block, that's kind of conditional, right? Well, they just added a new item to the game called the Monastery Bell. Count as blocking for the first target you hit with each shield attack. So this means you no longer need to wait to block damage. You can ram into things with a shield skill, and that triggers the Nova. The Nova has no internal cooldown. Technically, its cooldown is supposed to be sort of the duration, because it can't re-trigger while it's active normally. But Monastery Bell actually bypasses that limitation. So even though your block is disabled, you can still count as blocking. That might get patched. It wouldn't surprise me if they fix that eventually, but for now, it's usable. So how do we proc it? Well, shield charge is an obvious candidate. It's a good movement skill. It's very fast. It's the fastest of the shield skills baseline. If you use it standing in place, it is slower. 30%, putting it at the same speed as the second fastest shield skill, which is Spectral Shield Throw. So if you want, for bossing or something where you want to stand a little bit further back and be safe, you can swap out to Spectral Shield Throw. Personally, I find shield charge is good enough as long as you position decently, and it is technically faster if you're not stationary. So you can sort of move around and hit bosses that way. In my finished POB, I'm looking at about 10 APS on shield charge. So it's a super fun, smooth playstyle, just shield charging around. You're not really using any other abilities. Shield charge is your sort of main damage delivery device. So it plays sort of like an auto bomber. Very fun. So yeah, what am I doing specifically? I decided to go occultist. I think elementalist is a very strong option, but I think occultist has a more rounded package, at least early game. I probably will go with elementalist when I get headhunter and stuff going, but for now, occultist is treating me very nicely. The main sort of enabler for that is this staff mastery. So you're going to waste the points to click this. It doesn't really give you anything besides the mastery itself, but as you can see, you gain Unholy Might on block for 3 seconds. Because you count as blocking, you always have Unholy Might up, basically, right? So every time you shield charge in, you're immediately proccing Unholy Might. Unholy Might converts all of your Fizz to Chaos, and also gives you 25% Wither on hit. So that's a really potent combo, right? You don't need to worry about conversion gloves or conversion from tree. You just get 100% Fizz Convert for free, basically. And that has really good synergy with the rest of the occultist package. Since I'm converting it to Chaos, Ming's Heart is very strong. It's a little bit of a greedy ring, right? But it helps cap your Chaos res, and 72% Fizz's extra Chaos is huge. Then I'm using Profane Bloom, obviously. There's not really much reason to play occultist if you don't click that. Profane Bloom, 50% explode, pretty good. It's Chaos Explode, which is like arguably the weakest of the explodes, but there's some other tech that sort of helps juice it up a little bit. I'll talk about in a second. To enable the explodes, I'm using a Witchfire Brew. This is up pretty much all the time while I'm mapping, and just makes a Despair ring around me. So minus Chaos Res, and everything pops pretty decently. I tested out with like Curse on Hit rings and stuff, but the problem is often things die in one hit, meaning they never get cursed, meaning they don't explode, which is very unfortunate. So yeah, Witchfire Brew or some other Despair Blasphemy is like probably your best option if you want to do Profane Blooms. Yeah, I was talking about some juice. Basically, because we're pure Chaos for our main damaging ability, and our Profane Blooms are Chaos, I looked at this 3 dragons and thought it was pretty good. So our Chaos damage can freeze, and our Chaos damage can shock. So these are not like Conflux or like Elementalists would have always freeze or shock or whatever. So you do still need the % chance, but we get some of that on Tree, we get some of that on Graft, and we get some of that from Flask suffix. So this means that most of the time my cast damage is freezing and shocking. The base damage of it is pretty high. And this also applies to your Profane Blooms, right? So your Profane Blooms can sort of pop things really easily because the chaos damage is now shocking most of the time. And it feels really, really good overall. This helmet is a little bit greedy, right? It only has some all-res on it and no real stats otherwise. But it enables, 50% ink damage taken. It enables a lot of safety from the freezes, so I really like it. The rest of the sort of damage scaling package is, again, a little bit greedy, right? Body armor without many stats on it, but this is another Foulborn item. 99% increased effective Herald buffs on you. On its own, it's okay, right? But you can combo it with Lycia, Farewell to Flesh. Herald skills have 2% more buff effect for every max mana they reserve. And then I'm using Herald of Purity. Gives more physical damage, so that's getting scaled first by the increases from the Coming Calamity, then it's getting more from Lycia. The way I'm increasing the reservation is actually with a Guardian's Blessing setup. This is really, really nice because it multiplies it by 2, right? But it also gives you a free 50% aura. So I'm choosing to use Haste. Haste is sort of the best damaging aura that you have. Clear speed equals damage. So in combination with Guardian's Blessing and some other supports to juice it up, I'm getting to about 75% mana reservation. It leaves just enough to run a Flesh and Stone on my remaining mana, and it takes my Herald of Purity up to something like 40-50% more physical damage, which is pretty good. Yeah, for supports, the shield obviously has 3 sockets, so you're kind of limited to a 4-link, which does limit the damage potential a little bit, but I'm using Awakened Controlled Destruction. Like I said, it has 0 base crit, so there's no real downside to this unless you're trying to scale crit in some way. And then Void Manipulation, and lastly, Awakened Ink AoE. You could use something else if you wanted to. I really like the extra AoE that Ink AoE gives you. Yeah, it just makes everything feel so much nicer if you're covering most of the screen instead of some of the screen. Alright, so first up, this is just a map clear without me clicking any shrines. Nothing special on the map, just a T16. Yeah, I forgot to record the Windows audio, so it'll be a quiet, scenic view. Alright, and here's a slightly more juiced map, just with some shrine stuff. I've kind of been speedrunning shrines, and red altars been working pretty well. A lot of loot to pick up, and shrines or altars to read, which is not ideal, but, it's fast, it's fun. Yeah, I've been running race courses. A lot of map layouts are kind of terrible for this build. Like, even race course, I still get stuck every now and then, but any map with like a bunch of pebbles or ledges or trees, like Jungle Valley, is absolutely horrible. And yeah, I think it's a good idea to block some of the league mechanics that create stuff that you can ram into too. You're about to see here the breach mechanic when it spawns the fortress or the hive is a little bit miserable. You're really just ramming your face into the wall over and over again until it goes away. But hey, you know, maybe they'll patch that. Yeah, you can see the bosses. Sometimes it's hard to sort of position properly, but the single target's pretty good, especially when I have Excel Shrine and Echoing Shrine and stuff, so everything kind of dies. And yeah, race course is also kind of hard to full clear. Sometimes the little dogs that come out of the side push it over more than 50, but whatever. Alright, quick overview of the PoB. Like I said, currently I'm an occultist, so I'm going through a Void Beacon, getting Withering Presence, and then Profane Bloom. That's 6 points, and then I'm spending 2 points on, as soon as I find it, Lycia Ascendancy here at the bottom. So Herald Skills buff effect, basically. Yeah, a couple things to mention about the PoB. I'm sort of pathing out this way. I'm taking Static Blows and Winter's Embrace just for some nice shock and freeze chance. The freeze duration on this is actually much more important than you would think at first glance, right? This basically lowers the threshold for the damage a hit needs to deal to be able to freeze stuff like rares and bosses. So it's really good for freeze consistency and gives a little bit of damage. Over this way, I have some rune grafts, so 10% more attack speed with shield charge, very, very big. I'm getting Herald buff effect. I'm taking the chance to inflict up to 15 withered. That's just nice for sort of quality of life while mapping. Chaos Pen. Coming into a cluster jewel. So this combo gives Unholy Grace and Unwaveringly Evil at the front. Then I have 2 small clusters with Assert Dominance and Towering Threat. These are very nice, 70% AoE altogether and some life. The small jewels are very, very bad. I haven't solved ailment immunity quite yet on this build, so these are sort of my band-aid solutions with some reduced chill and shock effect. Over here I have one single 3% mana reservation jewel. This just gives me exactly 0 mana unreserved. You can also drop this and just change the links around, but I'll talk about the links for my purity in a second. Yeah, other important things to mention. I take Resolute Technique. If you're an Elementalist or something, you can probably solve accuracy without this, but you really don't want your shield charge, which is your main sort of proccing ability, to be missing. So this is just nice, you know, it lets you run map mods, it lets you ignore monster mods. And it only costs me 1, 2, 3, 4 points currently, so it's kind of worth avoiding all of the investment I would need in accuracy otherwise. Over here I have a Glorious Vanity. You can use the Find Timeless Jewel function to find a similar one, but mine gives me Chaos Leech, so I don't need that on gloves. It gives me some more Wither, double damage Fizz damage, and double damage Fizz damage. And then the small nodes are also pretty okay. Attack speed here, movement speed, max life here. And it is a Doriani jewel, so I get a Corrupted Soul. Currently I'm setting it about 6k pool combined, split across life and ES, which is, you know, not horrible. Just deselect my guard skill, so I'm not baiting anyone. Yeah, as you can see, like the EHP and the max hits and stuff are pretty weak. I have managed to level to nearly 98 at this point, playing with the freeze. So it is squishy, but it's not paper, right? Like, you can still level up, you can still play the game. Yeah, I think that's mainly it for the tree. Yeah, I come over this way. Force Shaper is pretty good. Small nodes are a bunch of attack and cast speed. This is decent. I might drop this portion eventually and fit a second cluster jewel over here instead, similar to this one. But yeah, it's a little bit slightly less damage, a lot more AoE basically if you go for that setup. In terms of skills, I have a sort of guard skill set up in my helmet. So I'm using Immortal Call, cast when damage taken, life tap because again I have 0 mana unreserved, and Wave of Conviction. This is actually to enable the Preserving Stillness rune graft. So when I cast when damage taken goes off, my Wave of Conviction exposes the enemy, and that gives me like a 1.7k elemental shield, which is up more or less 100% of the time if my cast when damage taken is going off, which is when you need it. Yeah, boots, summon Flame Golem. This guy dies all the time. I have to resummon him about, every map or two. But it is still nice to have him when he is alive. And he's linked to Feeding Frenzy, which gives me just, 10% attack and cast speed, which, thanks to Spiritual Command, also affects me. Oh yeah, I didn't mention it. Runegraft of the Warp, very, very big for shrines and for just general quality of life with your guard skills and stuff. That's the only other Runegraft I have. And then Despair, just for some extra single target. I pretty much only cast that on bosses or like really tanky rares. Most of the time I ignore it. And then Shield Charge, this is sort of your main, like I said, main damage enabler. So you Shield Charge, you want it to go fast, so you have faster attacks. Momentum is okay. Culling Strike is also okay. I was using Accuracy for the longest time, but when I went Resolute Technique, I was able to drop that and fit Culling in. And all of this is socketed in a pair of Insanity Gloves. So 16% more attack and cast speed, very, very nice. You got to remember that because you're not caring about like cast time for your actual damaging ability, which is the Shield Shatter, your attack time is your cast time, basically. So the faster you attack, the faster you're proccing, the faster you're dealing damage. You can see you have to fiddle a little bit with the PoB because the Shield Shatter has a duration, and normally if you're triggering it the intended way, it can only re-trigger again once the duration is over. So to get it to sort of ignore that, I've sort of fiddled a little bit with the reduced skill effect duration here to get the trigger rate down to about 1. And then what I do is I set a count over here based on my Shield Charge APS. So yeah, this is going off 1 per second, but it's multiplied by 10 thanks to the count, which gives us our actual, more or less accurate DPS of 22 million currently. Alright, next up the Herald and Aura setup. So like I said, I'm running Herald of Purity. This is very good, more fizz damage. And linked to Guardian's Blessing. That bumps the reservation up to about 50%. And then we add Meat Shield. And this would be an Empower if you're an Oiler. I thought it was kind of a waste to spend my Divines on an Empower here, but technically you do hit the level 26 breakpoint for 14% more, as well as getting 3 more levels on your haste, which is very nice. Oh. Alright, that doesn't actually change anything good. Yeah, haste should be taken. Yeah, so I'm just using Ink AoE because of the 1.3x multiplier, just because that pushes the Herald of Purity up to the sort of limit that I want. You could replace this with a Feeding Frenzy, which is a 1.2 multiplier like Meat Shield. That gives you just a couple mana unreserved, and then you could drop this mana reservation jewel that I have here. But it does also lower the buff effect from Herald of Purity because you're lowering the mana reservation, obviously. Alright, and then for the shield, it's a little bit messy because I don't have it linked, but basically it's, like I said, Control Destruction and Void Manip and Ink AoE. You can swap this out for like Conk Effect if you're doing bossing. It does a little bit more damage, but honestly, Ink AoE is still kind of nice then because you can stand further away. Some utility, got Flame Dash, Flesh and Stone, very good. Always in Sand Stance for 20% less taken. The AoE is nice and big, so this is mostly giving you good mitigation against the whole screen. And that's about it for the skills. Config, there shouldn't be anything too crazy that I've done. We have Frenzy Charges thanks to Blood Rage, only on kill, but I'm not really taking this build into bossing encounters. You can, but then you'd have to solve frenzy charges somewhere else, and I'm just treating it as a pure, fun, fast mapper. Unholy Might, like I said, this is always up, so that's accurate. Killed recently, 5 enemies, that's just to get the Assert Dominance up. Again, if you remove that, it doesn't really change anything about the build, it just lowers your AoE. Shatter, yep, usually while mapping. Shock, yep, while mapping, and blocked recently. I think that's activating the flat spell damage buff from Shield Shatter, which is, like 5% damage or something, whatever. And then the enemy is Cursed. Wither, I have, I'm hitting 20 times per second usually, right? The shield charge is going off 10 times per second, and then Shield Shatter is triggering every time it goes off. So 20 hits per second with 50% chance to wither means 15 wither stacks should only take a second and a half. Shock, like I said, I have 3 dragons. Chaos damage can shock and chaos damage can freeze. So if we come into the config, I think the shock that I've set is pretty reasonable. So if you look at the pinnacle number, that's all we really sort of care about. That's pretty much it. It's at the Guardian Pinnacle. Yeah, in terms of items, like I said, the sort of 1-2 combo is mandatory. My Monastery Bell has AoE Corrupt and Onslaught on kill. You could also do Endurance Charge on stun maybe, but I'm not really sure how well that works when you're freezing. I think there's some weird interaction with stuns. Yeah, Shattershard, random corrupt. Like, ideally, you'd probably want max life or reduced damage from crits on this. I just happened to roll +2 AoE gems, which is about 2% more damage, thanks to my links. Alright, one thing I forgot to do, but that I've fixed now, is if you go into PoB, you can manually edit the shield down to have no armor and evasion on it. And then I've also, in the config, set my block chance to be 0. Because basically, like I said, every time Shield Shatter goes off, you lose the defenses. So you keep the life, but that's pretty much the only thing on this shield that is active after you've blocked. You lose all of your block chance, both attack and spell block, and you lose the 500 or whatever evasion and armor that the shield had. Like I said, the helmet, Felborn 3 Dragons, this corrupt is not the best, but it's better than nothing. You're looking for the double Felborn variant, right? So Chaos can freeze and Chaos can shock. And then the implicits, honestly, like the best one would probably be something like Lightning Ailment Effect and Life. Or maybe 90% Socketed Multiplier if you put your auras in there in the future. I have one of those, but I couldn't really think of a good use for it right now because I sort of want my mana reservation to be 100%, and there's nothing I could fit with the extra unreserved that would give me currently. Coming Calamity, again, this is not the best like endgame option. I'm probably going to be replacing this pretty soon here with an Explodey chest, just in terms of quality of life and some tankiness. Having a Explodey with some Taken As and a little bit more evasion and ES on it would be really, really nice. But this has carried my ass to nearly level 98, so, it should be good enough for getting started. It's pretty cheap. You don't need the 100% roll. Anything between sort of 97 and 99 is the same, at least for my tree, and 100% would be the next breakpoint, so, ideally, I would have 100% here, but they are pretty much more expensive. And if I was going to upgrade this, I think I would rather go for like 97% plus with some sort of implicits, right? Either plus Socketed Gems or increased global damage or max res or reduced crit damage taken, I think are all pretty good. But like I said, I don't really feel like investing any more into this considering I'm probably going to be replacing it. Gloves are kind of bad. They're just Insanity Gloves on a fractured base with a little bit life, ES, and craft at attack speed. I think endgame, I think I would recraft these and get the Essence attack speed with Essence Insanity and a third resistance of some kind, as well as a little bit more life and better implicits. Boots, kind of same story. I think ideally I should go for a Storm Shroud setup here with Shock Avoid. A little bit more life and upgrade the action speed up to 6%. Amulet is also very, very bad. This is just to fill my attributes and one res I was missing, basically, as well as the non-channeling mana cost. Ring, kind of the same story. Bone rings are actually very nice because they can roll minion, attack, and cast speed, which again, thanks to spiritual aids, affects us. And again, it's just to solve my mana. My shield charge costs 0 mana, right, which is nice when it starts going off 20, 30 times a second with Excel Shrine or Echoing Shrine. So having it, no mana cost is nice in that regard, but also, obviously, I have 0 unreserved mana at the moment, so I kind of need that for it to work. And then, Ming's Heart, like I said, it's greedy, but it's great for damage. You can see this is like, I lose 40% of all my damage if I take this off. Similar-ish story with the body armor. I lose 20% damage, but that's probably worth losing. Mings, I'm not so sure about. Bisco's kind of a trash item, but Rampage is very nice. Movement speed is kind of damage, right? Like for long shield charges. If you finish them faster, you can start the next one faster, so you're dealing more DPS basically. And eventually this obviously becomes Headhunter. I think the build is like a perfect candidate for Headhunter scaling. Last couple small things about the build. Like I said, I'm using the defensive grafts. So Tull Graft is the Preserving Stillness, that's the exposure shield. And then Molten Zoff Graft is kind of a Molten Shell type thing when you take damage. Both of these can roll some pretty okay mods. You want Graft Blood gained, obviously, for anything you're doing with the mechanic usually. But this one has 14% global AoE on it, and this one has 16% global chance to freeze on it. I would look, and then, for suffixes, any like increased duration or cooldown recovery stuff, or this one has extra shield on it. This is like 30% more shield, actually, which is pretty nice. My flasks, Witchfire Brew. You could go Oriath's End, too, for some more explodey. I couldn't really think of a good flask to drop for it at the moment, though. If I had CB immunity, I would probably drop Life Flask, honestly, and put on Oriath's End, but Quicksilver Flask is kind of mandatory. This one has my Freeze Shock suffix on it. And then, big PSA. Two things are sort of mandatory for the build. It doesn't have to be from the flask, but you need phasing. You can also go a Watcher's Eye with like haste phasing on it, but phasing makes everything feel much better. If you don't have phasing, your character will like desync a lot, which is weird because, shield charge stops when it hits an enemy, so that shouldn't be happening, but it does. The other thing is you have to play the game on predictive networking mode. If you are on lockstep, you will be miserable. I also went into a production config and disabled sound_effects. That helps a lot with performance when you're like exploding and freezing everything. I would say the first two are like mandatory. The third one is just kind of quality of life. You do lose the nice Profane Bloom and Freeze Shatter sound effects, though, which is negative quality of life, so up to you.